Hello, my name is John Fuller. I'm the Director of Advanced Concepts at Virgin Orbit, and I'm here to present Virgin Orbit's paper at the SmallSat conference for you today on building a global launch network. This is a paper that describes a set of tools we've developed that go one step further to numerically quantify exactly what air launch can bring to customers when you can originate missions around the world. I'll start just by identifying the space industry has seen tremendous achievements over the past decade. We've seen a lot of amazing feats, including the Mars Curiosity rover landing on the Martian surface after the 7 minutes of terror through a atmosphere that was not very well understood at the time. We've seen Falcon 9 boosters being recovered and refurbished at a very high rate, bringing down the cost of launch. We've seen the X-37B spaceplane performing multiple records in space for longer and longer durations, doing maneuvers that were once thought impossible for such a spacecraft. And we've also seen achievements in spacecraft servicing. Northrop Grumman's MEV-1 vehicle successfully docked with the geostationary satellite. Alongside all of these achievements, there's still a lot of challenges when it comes to space access, particularly when it comes to launch. So launch has primarily been a bottleneck for access to orbit, and this is really due to a lot of the same reasons that were a barrier to launch many decades ago when launch was first conceived. This can include bad weather, it can include maritime or aircraft traffic. It can also include the downrange populations, which restrict launch corridors so as not to place undue risk on populations that live downstream. So with these challenges to launch, Virgin Orbit has brought forth our Launcher One air launch system. This LOX kerosene rocket based underneath the wing of a 747 carrier aircraft or launch pad in the sky is our way of getting around those challenges and bringing more availability, more access, and just a greater degree of flexibility for the payload customer. This means that air launch can offer you any orbit and any inclination. It can offer the schedule and timeline that a customer needs. It can offer a high rate and a launch cadence as afforded by our high production factory in Long Beach, California. And it can do this while being based from any spaceport around the world for launch in a very responsive and flexible way. So this is the system, and here's an overview of our operational footprint out in the Mojave Desert. This is our transportable set of ground support equipment that makes Launcher One able to perform launch anywhere around the world. As enabled by our high-rate factory, as identified in Long Beach, California, with 5 rockets in flow, as well as a supporting network of spaceports at Mojave Air and Spaceport, Spaceport UK, Spaceport Japan, as well as Guam out in the middle of the Pacific. So none of this is new. This has been something that Virgin Orbit has long identified as our value proposition. But what is new, and what I'll be sharing with you today, is a set of extensive spaceport assessment tools that we have developed over the past few years that really give an extra bit of numerical proof that any orbit is accessible at much a greater degree of availability and a much greater degree of inclination and telemetry access. So what it is a model-based set of tools based in MATLAB, which seek to simulate thousands and thousands of air launch trajectories as they originate in any region in the vicinity of a hosting spaceport. It evaluates those trajectories for their downrange risk to populations. It evaluates them for their telemetry coverage, and it also gets into the details of what kind of aircraft range and CONOPS are required to support such a mission, and identifies the best regions of access in the vicinity of any given spaceport. So the picture shown here on this particular slide shows the assessment in the vicinity of Spaceport Japan, where several sectors of release sites are equidistantly generated and simulated with these high-fidelity trajectory results. So with the downrange casualty expectation assessment, as well as the aircraft range assessments that we get out of this tool, I'd like to take a moment to present to you some launch forecasts based on 6 candidate spaceports that we can host Launcher One from. Here we have some output from the tools shown in wonderful color. This is an E sub C, or casualty expectation plot, and on the far right is a telemetry plot. And what this shows is exactly where out over the ocean is best to originate a mission for any given inclination. This is sweeping from sun synchronous at a southern launch azimuth through low inclination due east, back up through sun synchronous to the north. And so what you're seeing are colors that indicate E sub C, or casualty expectation or risk to the downrange population overall, where a red site cannot originate a Launcher 1 mission just due to the dangers of downrange flight, versus orange, yellow, green, and blue, which are acceptable based on E sub C calculation via the FAA's approved methodology for Launcher 1. Likewise, on the far right, you see the evolving green, yellow, and red coverage for telemetry, where release in the vicinity of various JAXA telemetry sites is predicted via the tool and shows us where best to release a mission based on inclination access, E sub C coverage, as well as telemetry coverage. So with that, I will get into our home spaceport at Mojave Air and Spaceport here in California. As one would expect, launch out of a Californian coast launch site can offer a good degree of access to high inclination, generally down through about 60 degrees before a fixed site launch vehicle out of Vandenberg would need to dogleg its trajectory. But the regions you're seeing in this plot here, from the green out through the aquamarine and through the blue, are showing just what a little bit of aircraft range and the ability to originate a launch further away from the coast and those downrange populations, what that will give you. So what we see here by this particular region is access to 50 degrees inclination, just based on the ability to avoid the populations of Baja and South America. Likewise, we continue out even further to about 450 nautical miles. That offers access to 40 degrees and possibly lower if we were to go and sharpen the pencil, possibly for inclinations to 35 and 30. This is a very important conclusion for Mojave Air and Spaceport, mainly because it offers the fact that air launch can offer inclinations as low as an East Coast launch out of the same hosting spaceport that we would normally do sun synchronous. So we're very excited to have these findings. So next we have Guam, Virgin Orbit's selection for mid-inclination and low-inclination launch out over the Pacific. Guam would have a high degree of access to just about any inclination purely by the fact that it's not near any downrange populations. But what the tool is showing here is exactly what regions are best to access the most inclinations. So here within 300 nautical miles, we show a sweep of access between 20 degrees all the way up through polar, and then proceeding further from Guam at the extent of the analysis of about 1,000 nautical miles, we can reach equatorial orbit, mid-inclination, sun synchronous orbit, and then many times at twice daily opportunities, meaning we can launch both to the south and to the north. Next, we have Kennedy Space Center out in Florida. Equipped with the shuttle landing facility, Kennedy is a very attractive location for hosting air launch, purely by way of having all existing infrastructure pretty much turnkey and ready to go. So we see this corridor down to the southeast. As you proceed out over the Atlantic Ocean, you're able to open up access to inclinations higher than traditionally accessed by fixed launch vehicles in Florida. This includes 50 degrees up through 60 degrees by way of avoiding those downrange populations in Europe. Likewise, continuing further to the extent of the analysis to the east and 1,000 nautical miles, inclinations as high as 70 degrees and 80 degrees can both be reached. One last thing to note with Florida, all of these analyses do not assume any trajectory doglegging, but with that added capability to the analysis, we believe that sun synchronous and 90-degree access could also be shown out of the same spaceport. Moving across the pond over to Spaceport Cornwall in UK, where Virgin Orbit is working to bring domestic launch to the mainland United Kingdom. We see a substantial amount of access out to the west of the island, mainly by way of avoiding all of the downrange populations in Northern Europe as well as Africa. These regions shown here have a high degree of access up near Iceland and to the North Sea, with access to sun synchronous, polar, and inclinations as low as 75 degrees. Likewise, with a region of access for sun synchronous, polar, and high inclination, both with twice daily opportunities out over the southwest and near the Canary Islands. So next we have Spaceport Japan, based out of the Oita Airport. Here we see a healthy degree of access down to the southeast, with regions increasing in viability just due to the ability to avoid populations to the south, as well as down towards Australia and New Zealand. So here we see flying just 600 nautical miles south affords access to inclinations as low as 25 degrees up through mid-inclination and 60 degrees, many times with twice daily opportunities, allowing multiple availability possibilities and multiple ranges of release. Likewise, if we fly further here to the east, we have a high degree of access to low inclination, mid inclination, and sun synchronous inclination if needed, both at twice daily opportunities. And all sites considered here have a healthy degree of telemetry coverage afforded by existing JAXA assets. So very good results as proven for Spaceport Japan. And finally, here we have results generated for a potential air launch out of Alcântara, Brazil. An existing spaceport near the equator on the northern coast of South America. Alcântara is highly advantageous for launch because it is not only a very remote location far away from downrange populations, but it also offers very low inclination access, being positioned so closely to the equator. But what's important to note, that with the simple ability to originate missions a little bit further away from the coast, that access is further opened. So here we have access to equatorial inclination, low inclination around 20 degrees, as well as inclinations as high as 75 degrees to sun synchronous, with the simple ability to fly about 100 nautical miles north of the coast of Brazil. On top of that, flying down to the southeast or to the northwest allows expanded access to mid-inclination, high inclination, sun synchronous, and in many cases, twice daily opportunities for both. Another important feature of this particular region is due to being launched well within the vicinity of a coastline, telemetry coverage is very well supported by existing assets used by those out of French Guiana, as well as modular assets which can be placed anywhere along the coastline for better coverage. So bringing it all together, the results that you've seen for all of these 6 spaceports can really be summarized to say what inclinations can be reached for a collection of spaceports and what's the broad availability across all of them. So this slide here shows for domestic US sites, California, Guam, and Florida, we have basically access to any inclination needed at a very high degree of availability, is shown by the y-axis. These thousands of sites in the vicinity of the spaceports permit us to plan multiple release scenarios based on any given customer need. Likewise, the darker portion of these bars represent release sites that are well within range of the hosting spaceport. So the darker the region, the closer the access point to that particular spaceport, showing quite a high degree of inclination access for all 3 of the US sites. For our international partner sites, as well as potential sites such as Brazil, we have a healthy degree of access with high inclination, polar, and sun synchronous out of the UK, 25 degrees through sun synchronous out of Japan, as well as any conceivable inclination necessary out of Brazil, and all within a fairly close aircraft range, 200 nautical miles or 300 nautical miles or so, well within the Launcher 1 baseline. So this set of results really establishes how much more access and availability you can achieve with air launch as opposed to a fixed site infrastructure that may only have 1 launch opportunity per day. So to conclude, this suite of tools has offered a substantial amount of data, terabytes of data, that have given us a good degree of insight into what air launch can viably do. It has shown an extreme amount of inclination access, due to the ability just to move trajectories slightly away from downrange populations, which fixed vehicles cannot do without doglegging. It has shown an extreme amount of availability that is accessible by the air-launched approach, in that multiple release sites up in the thousands can be planned to mitigate things such as weather or air traffic or marine traffic. It has shown high benefit and mission confidence based on the flexibility that we can achieve out of all of these particular approaches, and whether maybe you need to do a mission out of 2 candidate spaceports and you would rather wait to down select to one of them later. This kind of flexibility and ability to place in multiple campaigns is very powerful. It's offered a good degree of insight into mission planning for all stakeholders in a mission, whether they be the customer, whether they be the spaceport stakeholder in particular, or mission planners and engineers at Virgin Orbit. And finally, and most importantly, by numerically showing the reduction in risk to downrange populations and ability to avoid them entirely by releasing in different places around the world, these results and these tools have decisively shown that the bottleneck and access to launch can be reduced. So we're very excited to share these with you. If you have any questions about the results of the Spaceport tools, whether I spoke about them today or the ones that I was not able to speak about, feel free to reach out to me personally. My email and LinkedIn are included at the conclusion of these slides. And again, thank you.